Welcome back, everybody. It's Sergeant Jerry. I'm here with my partner, Detective Michele, and we have a very, very, very special guest this week. We know that most of our viewers and listeners are police or friends of police, and we seem to be railing against bail reform and other criminal justice reforms on a weekly basis. But we wanted to hear the other side of it, because just because we think one way doesn't mean that we're right, because you could be wrong. So we have a very, very prominent criminal defense attorney who's got a very, very storied career here in New York and across the nation. He probably doesn't need an introduction if you're watching this, but since you might be listening to us, we'd like to welcome to Inside Blue 360, Mr. Ron Kuby.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. It's actually a pleasure to be here. I mean that.
It's a pleasure to have you, Ron.
Well, Ron, it's a pleasure to have you here. For those that don't know Ron or have never read about him or seen him on TV,
then I don't care.
Yeah, don't care. Google. It's called Google.
Ron is 63 years old. He's been practicing law for almost 40 years. He's had a pretty interesting life. His dad, I read, was once a Franciscan monk before converting to Judaism. Ron himself, as a young man, was a member of the Jewish Defense League, which I found
we all have to apologize
extremely interesting, because he ended up defending El Sayed Nosair, the man who killed, or allegedly killed, I think he was convicted.
Allegedly.
It depends which jury you believe. The state jury found him not guilty. The federal jury found him guilty.
And as we've discussed, those federal juries could be tough.
They're killers.
So he defended El Sayed Nosair. He's defended the blind sheikh, Abdel Rahman. He's defended Colin Ferguson, the Long Island Railroad shooter. He's defended the Hells Angels.
Mom was so proud of the Colin, right? Yeah.
The Hells Angels, of all people. I guess you guys had like a long hair contest in the clubhouse. But we wanted to talk to Ron. We wanted to talk to Ron about bail reform. And Ron, we'll just throw it to you. What's your take on the bail reform that's taken place in New York State so far?
I think the first thing we have to do is figure out how we got here.
Right.
Because this didn't just happen overnight. In 1947, the New York Court of Appeals, the state's highest court, held definitively the only legitimate purpose of bail is to ensure the defendant returns for trial. And that was reaffirmed as recently as 2008, again by the New York State Court of Appeals. That was the law. Notwithstanding the law that everybody supports, except when they don't like it, what happened was that judges routinely made decisions to preventively detain people, to put people in because they thought they was a menace to society. Overwhelmingly, these were poor people. They were committed crimes that grew out of poverty. I'm not excusing them, I'm just pointing them out. They were overwhelmingly black and Latino. And holding somebody without bail tends to, in many ways, determine or at least heavily influence the outcome of their case. Okay? Because if you're working a marginal job, you can't call your boss and say, "Boss, I'm in jail. It's fine. It's no big deal. I'll be out tomorrow."
Yeah.
Right? You can't do that.
Cover me.
Right. So you lose your job. If you're a single mom, you're at risk of losing your kids. You have no income, and you're looking at having to plead guilty to something that maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but you don't have time to do what middle-class white kids have time
and
to
some
do,
of these aren't,
which is build equity.
Right, and a lot of these aren't the most violent crimes. These people they were in there for a very long time just because they didn't have, just like Ron said, the single mothers, one-parent families, anybody, that's their source of income, and they can't take off work, just like I don't want to take off work to fight my traffic ticket.
Right, and I'm not suggesting for a second that these folks didn't do it.
Right.
I mean, we all work in law enforcement here, right? We all know that they did it. 99% of the time they did it. But the question is, are they being over-punished, over-criminalized because they're poor? You take a middle-class kid. And I'm not talking about rich people. I'm just talking about the son, nice white son of a civil servant. He wraps his car around a telephone pole. Yeah, it's a suspended license, and they search him, and they find a little over a gram of cocaine. What happens to that kid? Parents are in court.
Right.
Kid gets bailed out. He's a good kid. He's got problems.
Right, he's on the lacrosse.
We all got problems.
He was on the lacrosse team.
Okay, so he's got a problem. He's getting straightened out.
Yeah.
So he goes into a program, which is good. He should
It's
go
very
into a
good, right.
program. He gets clean. He gets sober. He's out for a year, and then they give him a misdemeanor, or maybe they give him a conditional misdemeanor. They let him plead, continue drug treatment,
Yeah.
and they vacate it so as not to destroy his life because he's got a promising life. That didn't happen with black kids
Right.
and Latino kids. They were always detained because the judge felt they were a danger. And look, I get it. I grew up in the 80s and 90s and O's in New York as well. And if you asked white people, how many black kids do we have to hold in jail to make us feel safe? The answer was always whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So that's how we got here. That's how we got here.
It wasn't meant, I'm sorry, and the system wasn't meant to be prejudiced against anybody, but in a sense, it's prejudiced against lower income people.
Well, yeah, so I wanted to get to that point there. Crime is driven by economics. Poor people, regardless of their race,
Right.
do crime. Unfortunately, in most places, the poor people are black and brown people. That's just the fact of the matter is. But there are parts of this country where the poor people are white people, and there's freaking crime in those places. There's no
Exactly.
doubt about it.
Exactly.
Crime, low income, lack of food, lack of good housing makes people desperate.
Lack of opportunities,
Yeah.
lack of job opportunities, educational opportunities, lack of a strong community infrastructure.
Right.
All the kinds of things that incarceration helps to drive. Because you don't build stronger communities or good families or job opportunities or school opportunities by putting people in jail. Now look, there's certainly a group of people. I'm not a prison abolitionist. My daughter, who's getting sworn in today to the bar, there's going to be another one. There's
congratulations.
going to be another one, folks.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Nice.
My daughter's a prison abolitionist. I'm not. I know that there are people who are sufficiently dangerous
Right.
that they have to be removed from general society for the safety of us all.
Sure.
But if you look at bail reform, what they did, and this was not by accident, they looked at the misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies that don't carry mandatory jail time, and they made those offenses, mandatory ROR. The offenses that do carry mandatory jail time, the serious assaults, the armed robberies, gang assaults, some burglaries, as well as the upper level felonies, they all permit the court to detain people on a prohibitively high bail. Because they are deemed to be a flight risk. I mean, look, it's why you don't get bail on murder. You're looking at 25 to life.
Right.
It's a powerful incentive to
yeah.
not return.
Of course.
So how do we incentivize the career misdemeanorist from committing crime? And I was always a believer that, it sucks for the person who has to go to jail for 10 days or 15 days or 6 days or 30 days. But a lot of the criminal element in our city are career criminals. This is what they do, period. End of story. So instead of them being out for 365 days a year committing crime, if you've locked them away for 50 or 60 days out of a year, that's 50 or 60 days that they're not committing crime.
But then they come back out and they commit it. They
Yeah,
didn't
but
get
I think a lot of them were going to commit it anyway.
You're both right. I mean, you're both absolutely right. Like we read in the latest headline that you guys are constantly
Right.
overhyping with all the hyperbole. Arrested 143 times for token booth theft, subway
yeah,
theft,
yeah.
turnstile
It was only
jumping.
142 times.
142. Nine of which were in January alone.
Right.
Okay, what happened to the other 134
So
times, Jerry, under
Right.
the good old days,
Right.
which this guy started in the 1980s?
Right, he should have been
Right,
convicted
he's
for
a veteran.
Okay,
So
surely there has, whatever we
Yeah.
want to say about it, the old system wasn't working.
It doesn't work.
Right? Because if he did it 134 times under the old law, it's just not working, guys.
Right.
So
and the
for our
other-
listeners, every now and then I like to try to explain for our listeners who don't know. For our listeners who don't know, this guy Barry was a career misdemeanorist. A misdemeanor in New York State could get you up to a year in jail. Some judge at some point should have given him a year in jail. Put him in jail for 364 days.
But is it a sensible way to address what we all agree are crimes driven by poverty? Not that most
It's
people
not showing
and
him
he's
any-
probably some mental illness.
Right.
He's probably some mental illness
Right, and with
issues also.
comorbidity factors
Right.
of mental illness and substance abuse, does it make sense to take a guy who's stealing like $80 a year or $200 a year and
Right.
put him in jail where it costs $170,000 a year?
If you- yeah.
to keep him there, it does. I mean, from a punitive standpoint, we
Right.
want to punish. It makes sense. But look, for 170 grand a year, the price of keeping him in jail for a year, you could set him up in a nice apartment.
Exactly.
He could get takeout.
He could get taken. He could send him to college.
Right. He could buy some decent booze
So we can
instead
get
of this Georgie cheap
we
stuff.
can get him an apartment and a seamless account.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe I'll give him
And a computer.
I'll give him my Netflix password.
Exactly.
Right.
And he sits around and watches TV and says, this ain't so bad.
So-
This is a lot better than...
Well, okay, I understand. I get it. But I lost my can here. So yeah, I'm back. So I probably stepped on the cable. So I do think though, yeah, you're right. He's not a violent guy. He's not stabbing anybody. He's not even threatening to stab someone, which is a level of violence. But he's creating disorder, and disorder, when it starts to get to a certain level by itself, when there's a high amount of disorder, creates fear. Where people think that the streets are so chaotic, like I'm not going to travel out and venture out into the city because there's now a higher probability of something happening. Maybe not having some guy steal my Metro card, but maybe I see 50 of those guys, so I think there's a guy out there who might stab me.
Well, that's right. And I'm not denying that either. And it certainly could get to the point where different action has to be taken. We were there in the 80s, we were there in the 90s, we were there in the 00s, different action had to be taken. But notwithstanding the blazing headlines, I mean, I got down here, okay, I had to wade through a river of blood, it's true, there were dead bodies on the SBA steps,
Yes.
gunshots,
Yes.
everything I had got stolen, but it's not so bad. I mean, seriously, you can get to that point, but we've been warned about that before. We remember when Bill de Blasio got elected, along with Judge Shira Schindlin, sort of
Yes.
collectively dismantled stop and frisk as it was being used.
Yes.
We all know stop, question, and frisk, legitimate law enforcement
Right.
tool if properly used. Okay, but we also know how it was actually being used. And everybody said, wait a second, you're going to see a return to the bad old days. So the
Yeah.
first year came, crime went down. But it's just, okay, well, it's just the residual effect of fear of the cops out
Right.
there. But it'll go back up, and it went down again, and it's down again, and down again. So how many times
No.
do you cry wolf over the lives of poor people?
Right, because
Okay, it's not like
yeah.
you're not paying any societal costs.
Listen, I'm 100%, 1,000% agreement with you about the overuse of stop, question, or frisk under Bloomberg and Police Commissioner Kelly. As a guy who lived through Comstat as a detective squad commander, I used to see these precinct commanders get questioned. And,
They were belittled. They weren't
right.
questioned. I was there. They belittled them.
Oh, there's a spike in
You
robberies, there's a
watched
spike in
I
murders?
watched.
Right.
I watched a lieutenant, who's probably a father, a son, an adult male, get yelled at by a chief. I mean, what is that? That doesn't even work.
Right.
You're demeaning your own people.
But to me, and Michelle knows this, and Ron, you know this, and maybe our listeners don't know this, only about a third of the cops are always working. Always working. They go out there, they're going to do that 8 hours every day to make a difference. And about a third of the cops may or may not
Right.
work that day.
Yeah.
And about a third of cops, at least a quarter, but I think a third, are non-combatants. They're not in police work at all. And now you have to tell these non-combatants, you got to stop people.
Right.
So they go drive down a block, and they can see 4 bad guys. We all know what 4 bad guys on a corner look like. They look scary. They're like, I'm not getting out of the car and stopping those 4 guys. And then here comes 3 kids down the block who just coming from just hanging out at one friend's house to go hang out at another friend's house, and they get thrown on a car. And I agree with you. Now that kid is like, holy crap, I was up against a car, the one cop had his hand on his gun, they touched me inappropriately. It's not good.
I
It's
use
definitely
that
not good.
just as an example of the crying wolf syndrome
Yeah, right.
that was being driven by the same forces that are driving the demand to reform the reform. I mean, the police unions and prosecutors unions dumped about $400,000 so far into various candidates to promote this. Working with the tabloids to fearmonger. In some ways, it's like Trump's caravans. If April 1st, if the April budget comes and goes without bail reform being listed, this is all going to go away.
Right.
There'll always be outlier cases. I agree with you.
So I want to ask you about this because you definitely have a better grasp on this than I do. You mentioned the police unions are financing PR campaigns and highlighting the bail reform poster children, but the Prosecutors Association is also.
Yes, absolutely.
And this is all about discovery. And so, talk to me about Discovery. I know that they're saying that that this is like an unfunded mandate. The state dropped this on them, but didn't give them any money to hire all the extra personnel they need.
Okay, I can explain it.
He's got it.
Yeah.
So in New York State, which has always been a bastion of liberalism, supposedly, defendants and defense lawyers got virtually no information about their accusers or the evidence against them right up until the day or a couple days before trial. Can you imagine? Put yourself legitimately in this position. Hey, you're accused of armed robbery. Wait a second. Who's accusing me? Not going to tell you. Well, I didn't do anything. What's their agenda? I have no idea. The DA didn't give us the papers, but we're offering you a good plea. We're offering you a good plea. It's not the world's strongest case. We'll do an unarmed robbery, robbery 3. Okay, it's just a misdemeanor kind of thing. But I didn't do anything. I want to see the evidence against me. You can't see the evidence against you until just before trial. And we've been trying for years and years, decades, to change that. So there's much more transparency. The DA's office basically has to turn over everything they have. The defense is required to turn over everything they have. And if there's a specific problem with revealing the name of a witness, a specific problem, they can move for a protective order. Look, this is a gang shooting, and our witness is a member of the gang, and we, can't reveal his identity because of retribution. Fine, nobody has a problem with that. But that's like less than 1% of the cases. Most of the cases are stranger on stranger, or something like that, or DV cases where everybody knows each other, but they don't know what was said. And so we finally have the evidence that we need to talk to our clients, and I don't have a problem. I was watching body cam footage the other day of a car stop.
Right.
Okay, and it read. The narrative read like a phony stop. You failed to signal left-hand turn lane change. And when we pulled you over, we detected the odor of marijuana in your car. We asked you to step out of the car.
Right.
We did a protective frisk, and we found a loaded Ruger 380 with a 10-round magazine. You're going home. No, go to jail. And I thought that was ridiculous, right? That's just a lie from beginning to end. It was all true. I'm watching the body cam footage. I'm reading the transcript, and it's like, here's the failure to signal.
So you're going to have a conversation with your client now.
Let's take a plea.
Yeah.
You're toast.
Right.
You're toast. Let's take a plea.
Right.
And get that done early. If he has to do some time, he'll do some time.
Exactly.
So it is helpful for everyone. And this whining from the DAs across the state, we're unprepared. We can't. How can you expect us? We're poor. We can't follow the law.
Right.
Oh, wait a second, it's my clients, right? Come on. Cy Vance, he has an $800 million slush fund, that entirely asset forfeitures that he has total control over. He can write checks to anybody he wants. You can't hire a few more paralegals to do this.
I believe they're giving the DA $60 a night.
He's handing out $60 per shift.
If they work till 10 o'clock at night or something,
Ron, I want to ask you something else, because I think we kind of, with the cash bail, it needs to be fixed, right?
No, well, maybe.
Some little changes.
But not yet.
Not a whole overhaul.
Listen,
but there has to be tweaked a little bit.
So I get the economic incentivizer or de-incentivizer. It was being used poorly and unfairly.
And nobody complained. All the people who say we always knew the system was being abused, we always knew this was wrong, but this has gone too far. The pendulum has swung too far. All of those people, they were not talking about that when the pendulum was actually swinging the other direction. They weren't saying, oh, this poor guy, I locked him up, he's going to get prosecuted under the Rockefeller drug laws. Crap, he's going to get 15 to life on a 2-ounce Coke sale. I feel so bad, honey.
Nobody felt bad. I didn't feel bad because they were out the next day in the Bronx, so it was okay for me. Because then I would just, I said to this guy the other day, this cash bail, I would be doing all right, I'll go back out and get, they're just jamming up the system, and they're making it's like a wheel.
Well, here's what I actually think about it.
It's just a wheel, in and out, in and out, in and out.
I think that reforming anything, engaging in any legislative change under like this kind of pressure and outcry, it never ends well for anybody.
Yeah, no,
Well,
no.
So
It would have been nice if they actually did the legislative change the way legislative change is supposed to be and not snuck it into the budget.
We've been talking about this for 35 years.
Yeah, they do that.
Jerry.
They do that
Come
with
on.
everything. Yeah.
So give it a year. And then, and it was so weird to hear Dermot, talk about how the spike in crime in January was due to bail reform. It's like, you're a data guy, Dermot.
He is a data guy.
And for you to demagogue like that, you know what you have to do. You have to actually look at the people
Right.
who committed new crimes.
Yeah.
When they were out on bail under the new law, most of them were old law bail.
That's right.
And then see whether they would have gotten bail anyway.
Right.
And then look at the remaining group, whatever size, where this new offense was committed
Right,
because
right.
you were out on bail under the new law, and whether that MetroCard theft was worth the other cost of putting somebody in jail. And so that's why you don't talk about crime statistics based on the first 2.5 weeks of the year. Oh,
Yeah,
my God, murders are up 55%.
Right.
Okay,
That's
so,
because they were all sleeping from the first 2 months.
right.
It's like the gym.
It was a cold winter.
Yeah,
So
nobody was
I
out.
remember, you remember when I think we went 10 days in New York without a homicide.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was like the coldest winter in
Yeah,
history.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
forget who the PC was, but it was like he was saying, "Look, don't get too happy.
Yeah.
The cold weather is
It's
the
right.
police officer's friend. It's going to start again, and it'll be what it'll be."
And we
So
actually had a mild winter, so it's
you
kind of.
use annualized data to make decisions. You don't do it on the basis of the
Well, that is
last
actually the basis of
3.5 weeks.
CompStat.
Right.
You do comparisons, and that's how you know you can speak intelligently. Yeah.
I want to ask you about one other thing too, the Tessa Majors case.
Yeah.
How closely do you think that's going to be watched because of the comparison from the Central Park?
Well, the good thing
Yeah.
about the Tessa Majors case is that I think that people really learned their lesson
Okay.
about Central Park. And I remember when they let the two of the kids go.
Right.
People, on your
I was.
just on your Facebook page, let alone in the public as a whole.
And go ahead, because I know what you're going to say. 'cause
That's
you-
why I
you-
wanted to
you-
ask
you-
Ron
you-
this.
You said it to me on my Facebook
They
page. Go
were
ahead.
going nuts. And my feeling was, you know what? And I know the ADA. In fairness, it's Matt Bogdanis.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
Matt caught the case.
Okay.
Colonel Bogdanis,
A very thorough prosecutor.
a very thorough prosecutor,
Mm-hmm.
and I know him well enough to know that he's not going to make the same mistakes.
Yeah.
He's going to wait. These kids aren't going anywhere. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, people are watching him. Make sure he gets the DNA. Make sure it gets tested. Make sure it gets double tested. Collect all of the evidence. Then make your arrest when you actually have a case that you are ready to bring to a trial jury
Right.
and convict the people. So he didn't go for the easy and cheap confessions or anything else.
Right, right.
He went for the sort of hard, and look, the police did. I mean, the police actually gathered it, but it was very clear that this is not going to be
Good,
the
yeah.
Central Park jogger case again. So I think it's great.
And so the defense is saying that the uncle that was with one of the kids, the younger kids, and I can see how this happens, didn't understand fully.
Oh, yeah.
Because like I was saying before, sometimes we speak very fast in police jargon, and this guy's sitting here like this. You know what I mean? Like two different things. There was probably a language barrier and a little bit of knowledge about the law, that he doesn't know. So that's the other thing.
Well, as everybody who's done interrogations.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. The uncle got annoyed because it says the police are allowed to lie during interrogation.
Right. So one of the things that we criminal justice reform people demanded.
Little lies.
I like that. No, but this is the stuff that I want to hear from Ron
We
Kuby.
demanded that interrogations be videotaped
Right.
from start to end. And there was a lot of resistance and whatever. And I was always, do we really want that? Wouldn't it be a lot better? Because let's face it, 99% of the time, more than that, you're not tuning anybody up, right? You're not.
No, you're 100.
And so would I rather have no
Yeah.
tape, no recording, and be able to say, and you didn't record it, did you? No, I didn't. And that's because it was protocol, right? Yes. But you could have recorded it, couldn't you? You have video. You have one of these little
guys-
square things
yeah.
called an iPhone rectangle. You got one of those. You could have done it, right? And that way I can pour into the interaction as a defense lawyer
Right,
any
right.
doubt I want. But when you actually see these interrogations from a defense standpoint, they are dreadful.
The first-
They are,
Ron,
They're dreadful.
The first interview I ever watched, and it was the first one I ever watched from beginning to end, and it was a homicide. The detective sat with the suspect for about 5 hours.
Yeah.
Talked about everything. Childhood,
Yeah.
relatives, best place to ever been on vacation.
Yeah.
Or not go on vacation, the weather, sports teams. And then the guy, it was almost like now they were friends.
Yeah, no,
And he
yeah.
had to tell his friend the truth.
Right.
And you're right. If
It's
that was
death toss.
on tape, you would have nothing.
5 hours.
Yeah.
5 hours.
Right.
What'd you do? We talked about the weather. Really?
Yeah.
You talked about the
Yeah.
weather. What was the weather like that day?
Well, actually,
What was the weather like, Jerry? No.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
So that was an example of a reform that people opposed, law enforcement opposed. It actually has been a great good for law enforcement. And I know, look, the defense team, which I also know for the 13-year-old, they'll call an expert explaining
Of
how
course, yeah.
these techniques are correlated with false confessions. But as we know, in our little world of ours, just because a confession is coerced, it doesn't make it untrue.
Right.
That's right.
And when you have a true confession, you have a productive confession,
Right.
a confession
You're right.
that leads to other evidence. People are extremely reluctant to find that confession coerced. Judges and juries, they're not going to let a guy who committed murder go
Right.
simply because the police enlisted his uncle as a third police officer in
Right,
the
right.
room. Okay?
Right.
yeah. No, I was just curious because, I figured that it would be, and I was hoping that it wouldn't be. You don't want that outcry, especially for the family, especially for the people around that,
And
Columbia.
you'd actually like to catch the right people.
Yeah, you want to catch the right people.
Just not for nothing.
Well, here's a little newsflash for a lot of our listeners out there. Even criminal defense attorneys don't want murderers running around on the street.
Well, just remember, I mean, people think because I'm a defense lawyer,
Right.
I like crime. And of course, they're right.
Well, we all like crime.
Right,
We're
right.
in crime, right?
Keeps
That's
us
our
moving.
living. Right.
But you have to remember, I also favor effective law enforcement.
Right,
Because if
exactly.
you don't catch the guy, if he wins what we'll call a Belfast acquittal, they still use that term in the old days, jailbreak, escape. Yeah, okay. Some of them remember. It doesn't put any food on my family,
Right.
right? Nobody's coming to me to retain me if he's in the win, so
Yeah.
Right.
bring him to me.
Somebody said, it was on your page, that you were every prosecutor's worst nightmare. You had charm, insight, and you used to bully. You had a gift of bullying and making cops feel like, this is good, make cops and feds feel like liars. And there was guerrilla tactics in the courtroom. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's so cool. I
Because
wish I could.
they often are.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's good.
Nobody characterizes themselves as a liar, but people who consider themselves to be honest people,
Right.
do lie.
Yes.
Oh, everybody lies.
And they
Yeah.
lie under oath,
Mm-hmm.
and they usually justify it morally based on the fact there's a greater good here.
Right,
I'm
yeah.
not going to let this guy get off simply because I can't really tell the truth about how I came into contact with the narcotics.
Yeah.
They were on the ground after I searched him rather than when
Yeah.
he was running.
The dropsy.
Listen,
Exactly.
we're not going to relitigate the case, but I sat in a witness box and was questioned by this man to my right, your left, if you're watching on the radio.
But you won.
For 5 hours. We did win the case. It was. I said to you before we were on the air, I still kind of feel bad about that case to some extent because it was the defendant's first contact with law enforcement ever.
Yeah.
He definitely didn't handle it well. Maybe we didn't handle it well either. It was 2:00 in the morning. It was raining. It's dark. It's a legit gunpoint robbery that we're responding to. Not a 911 call. This was like another sector had the victim in the car saying the guy stuck a 45, I think, a silver handgun. I know it was silver, and it would have been malfeasance not to stop your guy.
But he was innocent.
He was 100% innocent. And in a perfect world, we would have stopped him. The sector would have come by. The victim would have said no. It would have been a 250, which is a stop question and frisk for him. And we would have cut him loose and said sorry. Maybe even put him on the subway for free or something. Who the hell knows, right? Instead, it was like a brawl. I'm lucky I didn't shoot myself where it counts. And it became a thing. in the end, he didn't get any jail time, which was good.
It was a resisting OGA and discon,
Right.
the usual trio of offenses.
Right.
And I think they dropped the resisting so they could try a judge alone.
Right.
So
Right.
they didn't want to trust me in front of the jury, so we had a judge.
You guessed that one. I was in the room with the DA when they said we're not putting Ron in front of a jury.
Oh,
we're gonna lower this to a B misdemeanor,
Right.
so it's a bench
Right.
trial only.
And I think he went down on discon as a violation, but it prevented him from suing. And look, my only real thing about that was when you approached the guy, you and your partner,
Yes.
the two of you gave.
See,
two
I don't remember
commands.
that we had conflicting commands.
Yeah.
But I
One
was the
command
sergeant, so.
was freeze. The other command was hands up. Now, you cannot do both.
What do you want me to freeze?
You're
or you want me to
gonna,
put my hands up?
you're gonna fail half of that exam no matter what you
Right.
do. And that's what bothered me.
And Inside Blue 360 refutes this statement.
No, but you're right. You're right, because the guy is standing there. What if that happened to you? Freeze. What do you want me to?
Hey, partner, hey.
I have.
Hey, partner, hey.
I know what I do. I mean,
Let me get a word in.
I'd go into every situation where there's a cop like this.
Listen.
Anyway, it was.
I felt
it was
bad
what
for
it
the guy.
was.
Yeah.
It didn't affect his life. It was
Good.
a discon. He went on to do whatever he did. You went on to a great career. Everybody moved on. Nobody ended up getting sued because of the judge's finding that it was a lawful arrest.
I will tell you this. You know what was wild about that whole thing? The wildest part of that whole thing. And I just knew that the case was winding its way through the criminal justice system, which takes weeks and months and sometimes years. And I'm going into work for an RDO court for something else. So I'm in business attire. And this is when people read the news on newspapers. And I've got the Daily News. And I open up page 3. And I see the picture of the guy and his name. And I'm like, why do I know this name? Like, I knew the name, and I couldn't remember why. And then my name is in the article. And Michelle, this is page 3 of the Daily News. This is the #1 story in the paper that day. And it's a weird feeling. You look around the train, there's got to be 10 or 12 people read the Daily News. I feel like they know it's me. Of course they don't know it's me. But it's an odd, I never had that experience
Creating
before.
a little frisson of fear in the witness is not the worst thing.
And then I walked into the precinct, and the desk sergeant goes to me. He says, this guy, Joe Salmon, who's retired now, Joe says, hey, Jeff, meaning the commanding officer, goes, the old man wants to see you in his office. And I was like, yeah, I bet he does. We never want to see your sergeant on page 3 of the Daily News. And Ron, you never want to see one of your cops and Ron Kuby in the same paragraph.
Right.
Yeah. And my inspector got to see that.
Lovely.
So listen, before we let you go,
Yeah.
I want to say a few things. Number one, we want to congratulate you on your daughter being admitted to the bar today. That is really, really
She's
cool stuff.
working in Brooklyn Defender Services. She decided to become a public defender. I told her at the beginning, and I really got to give a shout out to NYPD here. Thanks to all of your good work, but some of your bad work, I was able to completely fund her legal education.
And we were proud to do that for you.
Thank you all so very much. And I told her you're going to get out of school without any debt, which is rare.
That's
Good for
nice.
you.
Good for you.
But you got to do something with that for other people. And I know this is not what everybody would naturally think of, but she's a public defender.
That's a great
making,
thing.
She's
you know,
not
almost
working
nothing.
on Park Avenue,
Right. So it's just
reviewing reams of corporate
She
litigation.
should be,
Right.
You should be very
I
proud
am
of her. That
very
is phenomenal. What's her name?
Emma.
Shout out to Emma.
Yeah, congratulations,
Hey,
Emma.
See you in Brooklyn.
And so my other question is, we have 2 questions before we go. One is, The Big Lebowski. Do you get paid for that?
No,
You're
you don't
kidding
get
me.
you don't
He's
get
not an
paid
AFTRA.
when your name is used. I am.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I've been an SAG-AFTRA.
this guy's cool.
I was an AFTRA before they merged, and I'm SAG-AFTRA. I got my SAG card.
This guy is great.
But
They
you
got to give
don't-
you scale.
You know who the largest concentration of SAG cards of people you wouldn't think of are actors? You know where it reposes? Hell's Angels Motorcycle Club.
You're kidding
They all
me.
got their SAG cards because you want a bunch of big, white, scary guys.
Right.
Yes.
You don't need to make them up. They're
No.
there. Anyway, so yeah, I do have my SAG card. I do have my after card, and I forgot what we were talking about.
You don't get paid
The
for
Lebowski.
The Big Lebowski.
So you don't get paid for a
Did
shout
you know
out.
that was coming?
No, I had no idea. The Coen brothers lived on the Lower East Side. And
Okay.
Kunstler and I were very active there around the squatters and
Okay.
the Tompkins
Yeah.
Square Park Rebellion.
you
I know
made-
you guys call it the riots. To us, it's the rebellion.
You made
call it
Tompkins
robbery.
Square
We call
Park
it
nice.
expropriation. You know, that kind of stuff. And so they gave me a shout out in the movie, world's greatest shout out.
Any publicity is good publicity.
Especially that. Who
Yeah.
knows? It become a cult classic.
He's a movie
Cult
star,
cla-
this guy.
he is.
did. It became a cult classic.
It is a cult classic. And so I guess our last question for our mostly law enforcement attuned listeners and watchers, what would our audience be most surprised to hear about you?
I am a huge fan of Christmas.
Oh, wow.
We have a place in the Poconos, like so many of you. Actually, I think some of you actually live there and commute in, but we won't go into that.
That's fireman, Ron. Fireman do that.
Yeah.
And so we have a country house where we always get a tree and lots of decorations and lights and everything else. It's sort of white trash gingerbread look.
Nice.
In the city where we have a place, we also have a tree with roping and
Oh,
everything
wow.
else. Hallmark card. And because I'm an atheist, every year, in case there is a big invisible man in the sky, I get up on a rickety ladder to hang lights, figuring if this is how I'm going to go,
Yes.
people are going to find it really funny.
Yes. That's right. This guy likes Christmas?
You might be an atheist, but you believe in Santa Claus, is what you're saying.
Christmas is real.
That's
Excellent.
right.
Excellent. Very
He
good.
got a good point there.
Very good. Well, Ron, listen, it was really nice having you. It was really nice seeing you again.
Our Facebook exchange is lovely, but
Yeah.
it's so good to see you in the flesh.
And I want everybody to know out there that I always consider my relationship with Ron like the Bugs Bunny cartoon where the sheepdog and the coyote are like battling all day long. But at the end of the day, they punch out and they say, good night, Harry, good night, Ralph,
Yeah,
whatever their names
yeah.
are. We all have a role to play. Ron had his role to play. I had my role to play. There's no reason to take anything personally.
I'm still playing mine.
He's
still playing mine.
He's a professional. He's represented a lot of people with passion, and if you're going to hire a defense attorney, that's what you want. You
I'm
want
hiring
someone
him.
who's-
I'm hiring him.
What did you do?
I jumped a turnstile. They didn't
You're
catch
out
me,
of-
though.
Yeah, and you're ROR.
Michelle's selling swipes at the Franklin Street station after the show.
That's
if you
right.
need to get on.
I hope that token booth guy is there.
She complains every week about
Because
this
my
guy.
Metro card doesn't work, and he doesn't do the
You got
right
to put
thing.
money in it, just so you know.
I
Just
do.
you go
It's
to
the
machine.
advanced one. I'm not white trash.
You know what we say? Swipe, don't snitch.
That's right. You're right. I actually sat there for 15 swipes.
Right.
Like Hillary Clinton tried to swipe.
Listen, just because you act guilty doesn't mean you are. Right, Ron?
Listen, for our guest Ron Kuby, I am Sergeant Jerry,
I'm Detective Michelle.
and we'll see you guys next week on Inside Blue 360.
Yeah. Thank you, Ron.